Welcome back to Grumpy Vet Garage. I'm the Grumpy Vet Dino, and today we are going to install the Screamin' Diesel Performance Y-Bridge kit. But before I get started, I kind of want to show you where I am as far as maintenance-wise on my LBZ. So originally doing an oil change and discovered a coolant leak. So after investigating the coolant leak, found two different coolant hoses. The main one being this one that was leaking, and it was running down the back of the engine. And initially, I thought it may have been the crossover plugs that's on the bell housing, but that was bone dry. Did go ahead and change that, and you can see that pulled off the well, you can't see it, it's behind it, but I changed that plug, put in a billet plug, O-ring style seal rather than the flat metal gasket. Not that the flat metal gasket's bad, but pulling everything apart, figured it was time to, since how I was just pulling a lot of it apart trying to find this leak, I was like, you know what, it's time to go ahead and change the Y-bridge. So that's what I'm doing. So I've already pulled out the Y-bridge, of course, which is, I wouldn't say a pain as much as just time consuming. I'm going to be replacing this. Still got to sort out the harness. That's something that's got to get sorted out. Change the heater hose configuration on top. Went with the dirty hooker diesel heater hose outlet, a much cleaner solution than the factory style outlet. Also changed to HSP's forward facing coolant tube. I really like this. This is clean. It'll make putting the belt a little more interesting back on, but it's still better than I think the factory solution, and it definitely cleans up the engine bay where the hose went this way. So I think that's a really, really good solution. Also changing upper intercooler, or the intercooler pipe, the hot side, off the turbo. But yeah, just in general, clean the engine up a little bit. First part of the Y-bridge install is in. You can see there. Very important that when you're installing Y-bridge that you turn around and put something to prevent anything from falling into it. Going into that area, anything that falls in it will go straight up against the cylinder head, maybe even into the cylinder intake port, making it a much larger job. Granted, you know, covering the inlet of the turbo, covering the inlet of the intercooler pipe, all those things are important. But in this particular case, if you're not doing this and putting this in here, you are gonna cause yourself a headache. Additionally, a magnet. You're gonna have to have a magnet. I counted that I dropped something beneath. Let me get a light. I dropped something beneath into the valley here and here, numerous times. It's something to freak out about. There's nowhere for it to go. Very important that a ferrous metal's used. You know, you drop something that's aluminum, it's not going to get picked up. But using tools and all that kind of stuff, you can lift it back out, but you need to be prepared for that. The hardest bolts to install are laid out in the instructions with SDP. The front, again, I'm getting my light back out. That one in the front and the bottom, so the very bottom one that I'm shining at, and then this one right here, that is, it's not really coming in very good. That front one, these two front ones in the bottom, they're just difficult to get onto. This one in the back, easy, of course, easy. Surprisingly, the ones on the bottom, the nuts, Again, I'm trying to get you a good shot because it's important, I think. And if I'm shaking the camera, I apologize. But that nut right there, and then additionally on the other side, once you got them started, which I use the method of putting some grease on the socket. There's numerous ways to do it, but that's what I did. You get it started, and then it's relatively easy to come across with an extension to tighten that up. This bolt, it was really cool that SDP give you a shorter one, and they actually install a tiny disc magnet on top of it, which makes it very easy to get it into the hole without dropping it. The problem is, until you get it started, any tool that touches it pops it right back out. So it can be a pain, but it was really great that Screaming Diesel Performance provided a shorter bolt, because it's really tight between that bolt and the cover of the turbo. So after this, next thing to do would be install the mouthpiece. But I also wanted to touch on a couple things. You want to change hoses that are associated, hoses that go back to the turbo, to your thermostat housing right here. You want to change these hoses. Don't reuse those hoses, including heater hoses. You don't want to reuse. Granted, I got the billet heater hose quick disconnect. It's like a fuel pressure style disconnect. You need to replace that stuff. But additionally, before I forget, I'm trying to zoom in here. Your fuel fittings. So that's a PPE fuel fitting, and then nobody really changes the other one, this other PPE fuel fitting. But when you're removing this entire intake, it's underneath there. This is the time to do it, because once you get things installed on top, you're not going to want to pull it. So I think they're going to be worth it. Granted, the truck hasn't ran since I've installed them, but these are things you want to consider. Additionally, I'm upgrading the fuel system by putting a new inlet port. I put a 1/2-inch inlet port. So there's more to come on the fuel system upgrade part of this. But let's move on and continue the install. Install the air intake temperature sensor. Make sure to look at the wires and make sure the wires are good. I wrapped these. They were fine. But you want to make sure to take care of wiring while you're in here. And then, of course, already installed the coolant elbow. This is a PPE, but you could use a regular rubber one. I also wanted to point out on the Y bridge that they're thread-in studs. So it makes it real easy. Well, it's required actually to get in this bolt, but it makes it real easy to install everything else. So thread-in studs, real nice. I went ahead and routed my return line, my fuel line. You can see it right there. And then I went ahead and routed the feed line. Wrapped it with chafe tape to try to make sure to kind of minimize any kind of rubbing that may occur. I may need to put some more right there for the Y-bridge mouth. But it's important to get the hosing in, because once you put this mouthpiece on, it's going to make this whole area right here congested. So that's important. Next, I'm going to try to put the mouthpiece coolant system. Anytime you change any components on the coolant system of really any engine, it's somewhat guesswork whether or not it actually fixed the leak or is not going to leak after your repair. So it's best to, if you have the ability, to check that system prior to putting coolant in it. The Duramax specifically, I believe, has more chances of leaks. The oil cooler system for sure. Anytime you change a water pump, that water pump crossover, all those items are or possible leak sources. So on this particular engine, I changed the side block-off plate. I changed radiator hoses. I put in the HSP short route right there. And along with a lower radiator hose, I put an actual drain in it, which I think is great because the Duramax does not come with a drain. So I put in the drain on this truck. But with that many things disconnected, there's a great possibility that you might end up with leaks on this system. So there's really two ways to check beyond just filling it up with coolant and hoping for the best, which I don't believe is the way to go. And that is either to pressurize the system to see whether or not it holds pressure, or secondly, pull a vacuum. Now, I have drained this system completely, and there is something about the HSP radiator hose setup that's kind of interesting. It doesn't have the provision for a bleed. There's no more bleed provision. If somebody knows of another way to bleed the system other than pulling a vacuum, please let me know down in the comments, because that'd be potentially easier in a pinch to know a way to bleed the system if, say, you were traveling and needed to bleed it and don't have the ability to run the vacuum, seeing how it's pneumatically powered. But pressurization and then check for leaks that way, or pull a vacuum and then verify that it'll maintain vacuum. Those are the two methods. Before getting too far in your process, you're also going to want to look at your wiring and address it. These trucks are old, and the covering for the wiring is deteriorating, especially the convoluted tubing. You'll notice that the plastic is, I wouldn't say it's dry rotted as much as it's been baked for so long that it just crumbles. So at this point, it's always a good idea to address the covering. What I use is something commonly found in import cars, and especially European import cars. I don't have a European import car, but I've been using it. It's very similar to the covering that was already on the wrapping. It's a fabric style tape. You can find it online. Amazon, I think, is the best place to find it, but it's Tessa is the brand. Tessa tape. You can get various widths. I would suggest getting a relatively thinner wrap. It just makes it more pliable to make it easier to get around different things, make joints, so you can make joints with it and continue to wrap. I think it does a pretty clean look, and it protects the wires, keeps them together. But now would be the time, once you have everything pulled out of your engine bay, to address wiring. The SDP Y bridge and intake pipe, cold side, is installed. Considerations that you really have to have are the placement of the clamps. So I have the wiring running down because I don't want it to run over the top and then damage the finish on the pipe. So this is the way I have the clamps. I'm not absolutely in love with that way, but it's not touching anything here, and it's not touching anything here, but it is touching, not here, but it is touching here, but there is the convoluted cover over the heater hose. Not in love with that. Coming from my background of aircraft maintenance in the Air Force, you know, they beat it into your head as a maintainer that movement of anything can rub, and rubbing will rub through, so damage wires. So you want to get everything nice and stuck, so that if anything is moving around, it's not rubbing on anything. So check all that. Maybe reposition some things if you don't like how they run. Not super in love with that, but I don't know if I need more. It's not tight, but, and this isn't going anywhere, but I might tighten this back more this way. but you want to tighten up your connections. Make sure that your actual mouthpiece is going to fit. That's another reason why the clamps had to rotate. There's just no way to put them in that way. But it's in, and I'm going to continue buttoning it all up. It's got the nice port on the side for if I ever decide I need some inlet pressure on maybe an external gauge, maybe someday. Nitrous, that's not really a thing in the future, but that would be something you would be able to use that pipe for. Now that I think about it, I don't know what the pipe thread is. That would be something to figure out too. She's running.